What is up, my people? Welcome to another one. Let's talk about art and the importance of art and all of its different forms. Movies, drawing, comic books, um, TV shows, video games. What else? Even the martial arts. Self-expression through the martial arts. I am a big art fan, and I always like when I see something that surprises me, that's different, something that looks like somebody really, like it came out of somebody's brain, somebody's weird brain. I like those kind of things, you know. And I'm not that big of a fan of hyper realistic art. you know um that's what I don't like. And it's just my taste. Of course, tastes are subjective, but art isn't just, um from my point of view, art isn't just drawings or just things to entertain. Because in its essence, I guess you could say that it is just for entertainment or for self-expression. But I also think it's where the imagination uh, is free to think and to believe and to wonder, and to imagine uh, a better tomorrow, or sometimes even a worse tomorrow. So that's what I think is the importance of art. Self-expression and imagination, or exercising your imagination. And you've seen it before, to where a lot of the technologies that we have now was imagined by a fictional book or idea or TV show. So a lot of the things that we have today, as far as technology, like cell phones and helicopters, even, were imagined by an artist before they ever happened. And so that's why I think art is so important. And you know this is the same reason why I think that when people want to control you, when people want to control a people, one of the main things they attack is art. That's one of the main things that they go for. They attack the imagination and the psyche of the masses. And how do they do that? In my personal opinion, the blueprint of a government trying to control a people, and this is very important because I believe it to be true, um, is they control the art. And a lot of times they use a particular type of art to push forward, and that's hyperrealism, or kind of like pure style, or what they believe to be pure style art. Um, and I feel like that's happening in a lot of art forms. For example, music. Right. Let's talk about music for a little bit. Music, from what I remember, I'm gonna sound like an old head, but music wasn't perfect. It was an imperfect art form, and through the imperfections, you were able to create new things. I don't know if you play an instrument, but a lot of times you make a mistake, and in order to fix the mistake, you repeat the mistake 3 times, and now it becomes a pattern. It becomes a riff, right? And now you could repeat it and then go into each chord and then come back to it and act like you meant to do that. A lot of music, a lot of good music starts that way. It starts as a mistake and you trying to play it off as, yeah, I meant to do that. Okay, so this is the beauty of art, is the imagination and the capacities that humans have to correct themselves and to, um, as as Bob Ross used to say, make happy little mistakes within the art. But as we speak right now, you could hear music in modern music. Most modern music all sounds the same. Everything sounds the same. And this is something that you hear people say a lot. I haven't listened to a lot of modern music lately because I fell off for the same reasons. And why is that? Well, if you talk to a lot of musicians and a lot of producers, in particular producers that work with musicians, they'll tell you that everybody's using the same samples and everybody's using the same programs to purify their sounds. Purify how? Like to take away all the mistakes, basically, is what they're saying. Like to take away all of the static sounds. But to me, the static is what makes a lot of the old school music sound good. I like to hear that those little mistakes. It makes it sound so good to me. Like I remember JC had some certain parts in his music where you could hear him saying, "Yeah, that sounds good," right? or saying stuff like "run that back" or something like that. That's stuff that he was actually saying in the studio. They just put in there. You know what I'm saying? So that's the kind of stuff that makes music, that make art. And for a long time, I feel like people are just thinking about music and just art in general in the wrong way. They're thinking that art means that you got to make your art perfect. You got to make that line as straight as possible. No, don't erase. If you erase, you got to throw that paper away and start all over again. you know? And I think it comes from people not moving out of that first initial stage of learning your art form. Because like when I was in college, I was in an art class, and at the beginning, that's what they teach you. They teach you how to draw a circle. Draw this perfect circle and shade it. Draw this triangle as good as you can. Draw the light source. Where's the light source coming from? Where's your what do you call that, the horizon? Everything leads to that point or whatever. All of these things you study at the beginning, because it's important in the beginning for you to learn the rules. But there's something that they don't tell you, or they do tell you, but somewhere towards the end. These rules have to be broken. Once you know all of these things, that's kind of like your black belt, right? And the same thing in martial arts. You learn how to throw a punch. You learn how to throw a kick. You learn how to move out of the way and counter. You learn how to throw. You learn how to clip people. You learn how to... All of these things, you do it the proper way. But then after you get your black belt, that's when you have to go out there and try it out. See what works, see what doesn't work. For you, because you're different. Your body's built differently. And what works for you may not work for somebody else. Or it may work on this one guy because he's smaller than you or the same size as you. But once you fight somebody bigger than you, guess what? You can't necessarily throw that guy like you threw that other guy. This guy you can't throw. He's too big. You see? So you're going to have to maybe be more strike-based or whatever. My point is, the real world is not perfect. The light source and the vanishing point isn't always that easy to find when it comes to art or drawing, whatever. So you're going to have to find your own style. And that's what a lot of people forget to do or forgot to do, is to find their own style. When it comes to music, when it comes to, drawing on a piece of paper, a lot of people never left that initial stage. Which brings me to Hitler, right? Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? But look, listen. Bear with me for a little bit. Hitler used to be an artist, actually, if you didn't know that. Hitler used to paint, and he would mostly draw buildings. And he was still doing these things that I tell you about. These finding the horizon, where's the light source, and start making these very precise paintings that looked real to life, right, or true to life. Sorry. And it was mostly buildings. And if you've seen buildings, they're very boring to look at, especially today's buildings. They're mostly all squares or triangles. Sometimes you get a circle at the top, which is kind of cool. But mostly it's just squares and triangles, right? It's very uniform when it comes to architecture in today's era of architecture. Now you go to the past and you see a lot more creativity when it comes to architecture. You got pyramids. The further back you go, the better when it comes to architecture. But yeah, Hitler he used to be an artist, and he was a very unsuccessful artist because he was very boring at his art. Yes, it looked true to life. It looked hyper realistic in a way, but it didn't do anything for people. They were just looking. They might as well just look at a regular ass building if you're gonna draw things true to life, and so he resented that. He resented the fact that nobody liked his art. So when he took over as the Furia, or whatever you call him, he took it upon himself to get vengeance on these people that were more popular than him. These more expressive art forms, and he began to mock them, and he made his style of art the official Nazi art form. You would look at a lot of the statues that they were making. They were humongous statues, more classical based, and everybody was muscular and fit and chiseled abs and Giga Chat statues, which, by the way, none of these motherfuckers look like that. The statues look like that, but you look at Hitler, the dude's a fucking nerd, a dweeb. I'm pretty sure I could take him in a fight for sure. I mean, no doubt, right? But, but he saw himself in that way. He saw himself as a superior being, and he wanted others to see him that way as well. And so why is that? Why is it that these governments, the first thing they attack is art? Because if you attack art, you attack the mind. And if you attack the mind, the main thing you want to attack is the imagination. You want to seize that. Do not imagine a better tomorrow. Do not imagine better things for the future. Just focus on what's real. Focus on straight lines. Focus on uniformity. Focus on the real world. Because the more you focus on the real world, to be honest with you, the more depressed you get. Because if you look at the things that are happening right now, for example, the people that are in control, causing mass genocide, starting wars that your kids and your kids' kids might still be in the future. You got the elite sacrificing, babies and R-wording them, graping them, and getting away with it. Unredacting the victims, but not necessarily the people that did it. You start looking at these things and you're like, there is no Batman, there is no Superman, there is nobody that's going to come and save us. The bad guys are in control. That's the real world. And our imaginations is what keeps us with hope, because the facts of the situation are harsh, and but all we have is is the imagination, if you think about it. And we need to hold on to that, and I think that a lot of times, if you look at the history of fascism and the history of of a lot of this authoritarian governments, they focus on hyperrealism because you could only get so much hyperrealistic. Right? There's a limit to that, to how hyperrealistic things can get, and that limit makes everything look the same. At a certain point, everything just looks the same. You get what I'm saying? So that's easier to control, and not only that, but that's easier for a machine to produce. So just keep that in mind, because you already know where I'm going with this, right? Uniformity is easier to control, but it's also easier for a machine to reproduce. You know, so yeah, when it comes to music and when it comes to a lot of these things, I think chasing perfection is what killed a lot of these industries. And believe me, they'll come back. They'll come back once they realize that what's missing is the human element. What's missing is the soul of the music. Once they realize that, because bro, you could feel it. You could feel it. There's something about it that you're like, there's something. This sounds good. It just sounds really perfect, right? But then you start realizing there's a human element that's missing here. It doesn't have soul. That's the key to good music, in my personal opinion. That's at least to me. And then when it comes to art, is the same thing. You see a lot of movies. Try to be perfect and try to make people like them the same way they like that last movie. That's why there's a lot of remakes. There's a lot of reboots. There's a lot of bringing back old things from the past, right? Old IPs, and remember this guy? Like, yeah, I remember him, but why'd you bring him back? I thought he was dead. And it's is the thing. Also, people just can't let go of things sometimes. Like, this is the same reason why we got what is it, like a 60-year-old Iron Man right now? The dude's fucking old. But they just can't let him go. They can't find a new Iron Man because can't nobody ever replace Robert Downey Jr. Right? Nobody's ever gonna replace Huge Jackman, or whatever his name is. Is it Huge Jackman? That sounds horrible. So it's, part of it is that. Part of it is that humans want to create these big monuments that represents them, which looks nothing like them, by the way, and say that's the glory of humanity. And that's never changing. It's gonna stand the test of time. The truth is, most of these statues are gonna become rubble. In fact, the Egyptian pyramids, the reason they're still there is because they keep it up. They clean it up. They go in there and they try to remodel it and shit. Or at least that's what I think. But most of it turns green. Most of it goes back to green. But or covered by sand, either or. But yeah, guys, like, I feel like a lot of the art forms are dying for the same reason, because they all want to chase that perfection, and art isn't about that. Art is about imagination and self-expression through imagination. In whatever form you could do. Like, for example, let's go back to martial arts, and in particular boxing, because that's what I follow the most. But it happens in every martial arts. Like, let's talk about boxing real quick. At the moment, there's a style that is taking over boxing, and that every gym teaches, and that is the style of staying safe and using footwork as their primary source of defense. Right. This is a very common style now. Devin Haney uses it. Shakur Stevenson uses it, and so many others use it. And not only that, but it's the main style that is used, that is taught in every gym. Okay, even the guys that say they teach a more brolic centric style, even they don't know how to teach that style anymore, because boxing has been so watered down that they don't even know how to teach punching. Trust me, I know, because just look at the stats right now. Look at how many people fracture their hands. They fracture their hands all the time, dude. It's so common, and it didn't used to be that common back in the day. Why? Because there was a scientific process to make people punch harder and have their hands stronger. They don't have that anymore. They don't have that school just disappeared because it was replaced by fundamental boxing, but just the beginning stages of boxing, and the rest of it is just discarded. Inside game, non-existent. Cutting off the ring, non-existent. Learning how to punch properly without hurting your hand, non-existent. I'm serious. All those things you have to learn on your own. You have to learn by yourself through the school of hard knocks. Nobody really teaches it, and if they do teach it, they don't teach it properly. So everybody's fighting the same now. And those who want to fight different lose because they don't know how to do that. Okay, so there's one dominant style right now, and that's the hit and not get hit style, supposedly, quote unquote. And that's spelling the end of an art form. Boxing as an art form is dying, and it's becoming a pure business and pure just just business. And pretty soon, in my personal opinion, it's gonna become like the WWE. So just get ready for that. And so that is what spells the end, in my opinion, the end of an art form. And if you look at boxing, by the way, boxing in its purest form used to include wrestling and kicks, right? And then it kind of split off into three different sports. From catch wrestling or catch wrestling to boxing and Dutch boxing, which includes kicks. But in its purest form, it included all of it. It was pretty much MMA. And the same thing goes for MMA. If you look at MMA, it's going through those initial phases that boxing used to go through. In the early days of pugilism, and so MMA. The first style that took over was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Of course, it was manufactured, right? I don't want to say by who, but that it was definitely pushed forward by an entity that was in the shadows. I don't want to mention because I don't want to get in trouble. But if you look at that first UFC tournament, you will see that a lot of the advantages were given to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. And there was a reason for that, because they were trying to push that style. And after that, once it got uniformed and everybody was practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, then they started monopolizing, the MMA industry. And now you look at that right now, it's pretty much dead. Everybody's doing either wrestling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And nobody wants to see that shit. No, nobody wants to see something that is so uniform like that. And boring. You look at these fights, and they're just in the ground wrestling, sniffing each other's butts, you might as well you might as well just fuck the guy. What the fuck? What do you want me to say? um, but that's kind of that's kind of what happens to most art forms. Is they focus on the winning aspect way more than they should a lot of times, or they focus on gaining a lot more money or more whatever, and they just the whole system just starts looking the same, and boom, it's dead. That's what happened. Of course, this could be a revival, but a lot of times what happens is that the sport in itself is turned into like a gimmick sport and a mythologization of different things. Now that's when it comes to sports. When it comes to art, um, what happens is that you get a lot of underground people creating art. So the official art forms become the government's art forms or whatever, or they become mainstream. And what happens is like things like hip hop happen. So different types of art forms that are invented by the people take on life of their own. People just create things, especially poor people. Graffiti, hip hop, breakdancing, the blues, rock and roll, R&B. All of these things were created by people that were considered unofficial, people that were considered poor and renegades of these art forms, be it music, painting or whatever. That's usually what happens. And then, of course, the rich people take note and they're like, "Oh, that looks good," and then they start taking it and and pushing the prices up more or whatever. But that's just the cycle of things, the way things go. But there is a certain death that happens for a while. Now, my fear is this, and I mentioned it before. My fear is that this could be taken advantage by the new AI phase that's coming. You know, I mentioned that all movies sound the same or look the same because everybody's trying to copy, the whatever happened before. And in gaming is the same thing. Everybody wants to be a Dark Souls game. Everybody wants to be the next Souls game. you know. Um and but horror, I would say that horror is probably the only genre within movies that still pushes the envelope and still pushes different ideas and different things. I'm still surprised by horror movies. I think horror movies still got that wonder, and that imagination. Of course, it says a lot about our culture where, um, when it comes to all of these other art or movies, styles of movies, we want to keep it in line to certain things only, and for example, romance and love and stuff like that, these are very taboo in America. All right. um, you have to be careful who you say you love. You don't have to be careful who you kill. Like in movies, you see everything from kids to just people, all kinds of people getting killed, except for dogs. They don't want dogs to be shot, but everybody else you see being shot. In the 90s, it was a little bit worse because there was a lot of just random shooting at people. But the one thing you can't do is show too much affection unless it's a romantic movie. But even then, it can't get too heavy because people start getting weirded out by love for some reason or by pleasure, right? So that kind of tells you where the mind of humanity is, especially in the Western world, because that's where I'm at. It is the sense that it's okay to kill and be violent and show gore and show pain in people. Like, people actually go out of their way to watch these gory movies and watch people suffer. I think the other day I saw a scene where a woman was stuffed with rats and they ate her from the inside. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's okay. And but the main part that bothered people is that this lady, this monster lady, started pleasuring herself, and that's the main thing that bothered people. And I was like, I mean, out of the whole thing, that's about the only good thing that happened in the movie. You know, people getting destroyed and disfigured and stuff. And she was having a good time. So I was like, oh, it's good for her, I guess. But it really bothered people. And it's the main thing that bothered people. So it got me to thinking, there's definitely a problem with people and other people finding pleasure in things, you know, that bothers people, you know. And so yeah, that's what I've noticed the most, you know. And to be honest, I do consider porn or certain types of porn to be an art form, you know. But that's just my opinion, right? But a lot of those things are considered, you know, taboo. And listen, some of these things that I'm gonna say, I think they're weird and I think they're creepy. Okay, the other day I saw a grown man kiss their daughter in the mouth. Just a long ass kiss in the mouth. Now, me personally, I am not used to that, and I don't do things like that to my niece or, you know, to my son, because there's people that do it, their sons that kiss their fathers in the mouth. So I think it's weird. But am I gonna judge that father and that daughter doing that if that's the way they express their love to each other? No, I'm not gonna do that, because that's them, dude. And it would be disrespectful of me to say don't do that because it makes me feel a certain way. You know, there was a famous father and son in Mexico, and they were singing. They're singing, and then in the middle of the song, he said, "I love my father," or whatever, and he taught me everything that he knows, because they're both singers, and his father taught him how to sing. And then he kisses his dad in the mouth, like a big kiss in the mouth. And I was like, whoa, right? And I thought it was weird. I was like, that's crazy to do. I've never kissed my father in the mouth. That's crazy. You know? But they did it in a pure way, and in a way that showed, you know, care and affection for each other. You know what I mean? And I was like, it's weird to me, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. Okay? It's just plain and simple. That's just the way it is, the way the world is. Not everything has to be for you, right? And if those people want to do that to express their pure love for each other, then they could do that. It's who am I to stop them from doing something because it bothers me? You know, and so I just thought that it was just weird when I realized that in horror, people are able to push the envelope in certain ways, but when it comes to love, and when it comes to romance, and when it comes to pleasure, there's kind of these lines that you have to keep in place in order to not weird people out. You know, and then you look at with that same measurement, you start realizing all of the violence that we see in a lot of these movies, and you start to realize that how we're okay with that. We're okay with torture. We're okay with seeing people suffer and stuff like that, and we actually want to see it. You know, it's just stuff that I'd be thinking about sometimes when it comes to entertainment, and that kind of shows us where we are at as a people. You know, but getting back to what I was talking about before when it comes to AI, I feel like it's a lot easier for AI to take over when it comes to art if everything looks uniform, and especially if everything looks hyper realistic. So if you look at the other day, I was picking up a comic book, and or several comic books, which is one of my vices that I need to stop doing. I need to stop buying so many comic books. But so I'm in there looking for comic books, and I see this really hyper realistic comic book called Midnight Man. And I saw it. I was like, I don't get it. I don't get why people wanna buy this book. It's hyper realistic to a point of creepiness, and it reminded me a lot about AI. But the thing is, this book was super hyped, to the point to where it got my attention because of the hype behind it. So I was like, let me just flick through it, see if I'm going to buy it or not. And it was, to me, it just looked like AI. What do you call it? AI slop. Is that the term? That's what it looked like to me. Now, it may very well could be that this guy actually painted these things, and it took him 20 years to do, which is crazy. Or it could be that it's AI. Either way, it's not for me. I do not like hyper realistic art. It's just not for me. It's not a particular taste. And to be honest with you, when I looked at these things in the book, like these extremely creepy hyper realistic things, I thought to myself, if this takes off, if this guy becomes that popular, the same thing could happen to comic books, where everybody's going to want to look the same, and they're even going to start looking like AI, and then AI can definitely come in and replace you guys. And I just saw it. I just saw the writing in the wall. Is like, please don't become popular. And listen, I'm not even hating on the guy. I'm just hoping, for the sake of the last art form that I have that I still love, which is comic books, I'm hoping that this hyper realistic style to a creepy, in a creepy way, because that's what it is. It's hyper realistic to the point of creepiness. I hope it doesn't take off, and I hope it doesn't become the norm, and everybody doesn't want to go and copy that, because that would really truly suck. And that would definitely, in my opinion, make it easier for AI to just come in and take the last thing that we have left, which is imagination and the ability to dream of a better tomorrow. But anyways, that is going to be it for today, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys later.